I've been told I've got
Hello, Eric.
a patient who's been religiously listening to all of these, and she's telling me that I have like a predictable hi, how you doing for you, Scotty? And it's like, you magnificent bastard. I can't remember what I say now that she's told me about it. So I'm going to try and instead of say you glorious bearded bastard, I say something like that. But I'm going to try and come up
Yeah,
with a fresh sort of hello insult for you every single time as a way of
that's that's fantastic. Yabba dabba doo.
maybe that was a good, yeah. As long as Disney's not listening, we
Well,
could sign off with and that's all, folks. But yeah, I don't. I'm pretty sure that they know how to find you. So
yeah, but at least we reference. At least we reference then where we got it from. So we're not stealing. We reference them.
staying safe.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So
I've got a
Hanna-Barbera is where that Yabba Dabba Doo came from, just in case. I'm referencing them.
Big Brother's listening in.
Yeah.
Mate, how you been? You been good? Weekend was all right?
I've been pretty good. Yeah, weekend's been good. It's my 18th wedding anniversary today, so it's been
Congrats.
an exciting day
You're
already.
taking time out to speak to me. You must be in the shit.
No. My beloved wife is pretty good about this stuff. I mean, from my perspective, how good a day is this? We got up at 4 a.m. to watch football. At about 5:45, my darling wife went to our favorite cafe and got us all special anniversary cake to have with our coffee while I got to still watch the Patriots playing and beating the Chargers. And then I continued typing my seminar while watching the Saints play. It's been an absolutely glorious day, and I cannot express how much my wife is just an awesome, awesome woman. Love you to bits, honey.
Oh, mate, you won the game. That's a very understanding lady right there. I mean, I knew she was a saint for putting up with your bullshit to start with, but that's
Yeah, that's fair. But see, we've had 18 years for her to get really used to it, and it's like, well, it's not changing now.
it is what it. Well, that's a good segue onto the story that I wanted to tell you about. So, I did yoga for the first time in a good long while over the weekend. Because I was
Mhm.
just sore from a bucket load of training, and the local BJJ gym said that we're doing a yoga class. So I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds like fun. I'll go and do some yoga stretches. That'll take some tension out. Blah blah blah. So I get there, and there was the usual bit of mindfulness stuff at the start, which I just wanted to stretch. Come on, can we just get to the stretchy part? But it was good because I really needed to do the mindfulness thing. So it was sort of forced meditation that I really needed to do, just didn't want to do. But it did
Yeah.
remind me that I'm forever trying to improve myself, and what I think I started out as being about 20% asshole. I've been trying to minimize that steadily over the last couple of years to be a better and better person. But funny thing happened today, which made me realize that I'm probably, still about 20% asshole. I was driving with my little boy to pick up some fish from the fish shop, and we were stopped at a traffic light, and I look across, and there's some cops had pulled over a Lamborghini. And, like normally you'd see if it was any other car, I'd say, oh, well, someone's got pulled over, whatever. But then you see cops pull over a Lamborghini and it's like, oh, look at you with that nice fancy toy that I'm never going to afford. Fuck you, buddy. You deserve every single bit of that ticket you're about to get. And and so
Boom.
that's what made me realize, oh, you know what, Eric? That's not a very nice zenned out thing to think. You are a bit of a prick.
So the yoga and the mindfulness really wasn't quite having the
Maybe-
positive upregulation.
Maybe I should ask for my money back. It didn't work. Bit by bit. Well,
No.
I
See,
did realize a lot sooner than I would have thought that, hey, that isn't a nice thing to do. So maybe it is working.
Yeah.
Whereas normally I
See,
would have just
see,
thought, oh yeah. But
it,
then, yeah, hindsight, I thought, you know what, Eric, that's not nice. That poor guy, he's going to get a ticket. I mean, he probably can afford it, but he's still getting a ticket. That's not very nice.
Yeah. Well, you never know. They may have been just pulling them over because they hadn't seen that particular model and wanted to kind of grease through the car.
Well, the way that they were gloving up, I think that guy was getting ready for an uncomfortable search.
Well, it couldn't happen to nicer people. I think realistically, the practice of mindfulness is so that you actually become an observer of yourself and own your parts. So what you did is you owned the fact that you're about 20% arsehole, and you didn't judge it. You didn't kind of say that was terrible, I'm a bad person. You just went, look, I'm still 20% asshole. And so that shows really that you are developing, because, being the best person that you can be is about recognizing what you are and trying to inhibit. And that's what you tried to do. You didn't necessarily succeed in the inhibition, but you tried.
Small steps. Small steps. Oh, shit. But before we started recording, we were having a little quick chat about what we wanted to talk about. So the lead on to the story about where we are eventually going to end up with this podcast being genetic discussions and all that sort of thing, was that when I was a wee lad at the tender age of 11, I got a pretty nasty bug, a Giardia, plus a whole bunch of other things, which sent me on a 10 to 15 year isolating myself socially somewhat effectively. Whether that was because the bug shut down different parts of my brain, or my face looked like a pizza and I didn't really want to talk to people. We'll figure that one out. But after that, I became.
We can argue both ways on that one.
Yeah. There's two arguments to that. But then I did become a bitter, angry young man. And then thankfully I met you and you started to fix my skin. So then I began the journey of trying to improve myself, hence the minimizing that 20% arsehole down to a little bit less. So, well, you fixed my skin, mate.
Right.
We've got to fix the arsehole within me. So, there you go. But we did have a discussion about...
See, that's all neuronal interconnections.
Really
and they might not really, you might have a Kibra gene hiding in there, I can't remember, which makes learning something quite efficient. So Kibra is a gene that's got two edges to it, one of which will make you much better at, say, like learning a tennis stroke, and the coach shows you how to do it. And then another coach comes along and says, no, do it this way because it's going to be better. You're going to play a much stronger stroke. The problem with the Kibra gene is that it really hardwires and prunes it in and makes you very efficient. And that's the same with personality. If you learn to be an arsehole, if you've got things like a Kibra gene, it makes you much more efficient at becoming one and much harder to break those synaptic connections. Isn't that marvelous?
There's probably something to that. I've always been pretty quick to pick things up, but letting them go, perhaps not so much. Maybe no. We'll double check in a minute. I'll pull out my my smart DNA response. But the thought was that the reason why it took me 10 to 15 years to recover from what was a bit of a bastard of a pathogen, but realistically other people get over it, was that I had some holes in my DNA that we picked up on the genetic testing, which is why I had an abnormal immune response to a bug in my guts. So let's talk about the importance of knowing the holes in your DNA for health.
Well, that's a big open question. So,
a nice narrow
where we came into this, we were kind of talking about this particular paper that you sent me, and it was discussing kind of social effects of the mind and immune system behaviors and causing people to become either more social, less social, and how this kind of is indicated in spreading an infection. Now, there's a lot of different ways of looking at this. What that paper was kind of saying is that the body makes immune responses that help you kill off the bugs because it's essential for the human being to be social to actually develop a brain or a mind or a being you. And the less social you are, the less helpful to your brain's development it actually is. Now, what I've been studying basically shows that you can have a multitude of different genetic SNPs, or single nucleotide polymorphisms, which basically means that you've got a gene, and in nature there's probably more than one variant of it, and those variants can confer some different benefits. Like we were talking about with that KIBR gene, one benefit is that it enhances your speed of learning and the strength of the brain neuronal connections, but it's got a downside, and that is cognitive and flexibility and difficulty unlearning. So what I've been looking at is things like the immune system's inflammatory response, and the things like interleukin-6, which is a pro-inflammatory cytokine producing gene, and it helps the body's normal inflammatory response towards things like infections or injury. And it's part of the absolutely essential normal response. If you don't have interleukin-6 triggering and setting off an inflammatory cascade, you can't actually heal. And this is where people with significant immune genetic dysfunctions actually commonly will die out in childhood, because they can't be exposed to pathogens because they were dying too quickly. And, there's all these, when I was young, the Boy in the Bubble movie, as I remember it, and I didn't really understand it at the time. But you can have a SNP for interleukin-6, which gives you like 70% more inflammation. Now, this is particularly important, and it's associated with another SNP called ApoE, and the variances there combined with interleukin-6 will give you a much, much bigger inflammatory response to infections. And so what occurs is that you would kill off the infectious agent much, much more easily. Now, in that particular instance, if you have the right combination, you just don't die young, and you survive, and you get your genes into the next generation, because, umpty thousand years ago, we were kind of much more likely to die of being stabbed with a spear and getting dirt and guts and blood and bacteria, etc. in it, and you'd get septic and die. So having a heightened inflammatory response at that moment made it really, really useful for you to actually overcome those situations. And the people with a lower inflammatory response might be much more likely to die out. Now, since we've got this wonderful hygiene phenomena going on, let's say, in the last kind of 100 years, roughly, we've seen this real big turnaround. And in this last 100 years, 100 years ago, literally, we had people, the top 10 chances of dying were like 7 of them were things like, smallpox or pneumonia and things like that. Now, 100 years have gone by, and the top chances of dying are things like complications from diabetes, complications from cancer, complications from heart disease. And so we've got these really chronic inflammatory states. Now, in 100 years, we've gone from needing a really advanced, high-functioning inflammatory response to having those things actually not be such a good situation for you.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And so in a situation like yours, what we've got is this situation where a pathogen's got in and has started to dysregulate your immune system and is causing that heightened inflammatory response through molecular mimicry to not target the pathogen, to not target the parasite, but to still be really hyperactive and start hunting around for almost anything and find something that sort of fits the receptor and just punches the crap out of it. And this is where these dysregulated, heightened inflammatory conditions like eczema, psoriasis, dermatitis, and then they can lead on to, rheumatoid arthritis and a bunch of other things, simply because of molecular mimicry and a heightened phenotype towards having to respond. As soon as you activate the cycle, it just goes off and does what it's designed to do. And then you've got to hope that you've got some of the other SNPs that shut that inflammation down really quickly. So it's okay to have a big response because you've got this really good interleukin-10 and you shut it down equally as effectively. Somehow I don't think that's you.
No, I'm not good at shutting down inflammation. But what you're telling me is if I were living through bubonic plague time, there's a better than average chance that I would survive.
Well, look,
I'm
if you
built for
actually
a
think
different
about it,
time.
knowing where some of your genetics have come through that Northern European area, and you're here now. So it stands to reason that your forebears actually did exactly that, because otherwise I wouldn't even be having this conversation with you.
And that makes a lot of sense.
Boom.
Now
There's a
I did.
mind trip.
I like it. I survived the plane because
Yep.
I've always noticed that my hair does this like classic 1920s part all on its own. So like I think like genetically,
Gold.
I just belong in a older era.
Well, I like the suits. I just live in Brisbane, so there's zero chance that I can wear anything like that.
Mate,
Yeah.
we're just out of our
so-
time. Okay, that's interesting because I'd never thought of the the positive aspects behind having a heightened immune response being that you're killing off the superbugs. But now that we don't have the superbugs in our in our environment anymore, thanks to vaccination or good health or whatever you want to call it,
antibiotics.
that immune system's still doing what
You've got
it's
to give
designed
kudos
to
to antibiotics. Yeah, brilliant. The problem, therefore, though, is that those situations cause a whole bunch of other stuff. And we start looking at this particular chemical called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And what we get is brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is essential for synaptogenesis and maintenance of neurological pathways, especially ones towards making of serotonin and dopamine, so mood and motivation and a lot of really good things. So heightened interleukin-6 causes the downregulation of BDNF through some really interesting pathways that I'll talk about a bit later when we get to seminars, etc. But what we basically get is the more heightened inflammatory state, if you've got some of these other genes going on, you might be at significant risk of mood alteration, major depressive disorders, anxieties, etc.
it's interesting.
And so this is where.
So essentially, the genetic holes making us prone to inflammation, then making us susceptible to depression and anxiety and all the other fun mood ones, more from a genetic component rather than a inability to just can't even.
Correct. And so it's kind of interesting what you were saying is that you were kind of hiding yourself away, and was that due to your skin itself or otherwise? But it's actually both, because what you're saying is that the skin was so inflamed and damaged, and that might make you have a conscious feedback loop. But in the background, that inflammation was actually causing kind of brain leakage and gut leakage. So particulates could leak into the bloodstream that could get into the brain, and LPS is shown to drive. So LPS, I should say, is fragments of bacteria. And so the fragments of the bacteria that are meant to be in the gut, when they get into the bloodstream, can cause activation of the immune system because they shouldn't be there. And LPS is one of the most major inflammatory stimulating things that the human body knows about. And so we get that into the bloodstream, and then it can cause inflammation that causes leaking into the brain. And then that irritates and initiates more interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha and CRP, and we get this dysregulated immune system in the glial cells in the brain, and that causes suppression of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which then goes on indirectly to shut down serotonin production, and you start to get depressed. And then the longer that goes on, the worse these scenarios get.
You know what? That's it's sounding very familiar because my IQ certainly took a hit through high schooling years compared to primary school years, and it's only sort of, I managed to start to pick my IQ and my ability to retain information up again, fortunately, after I left uni, which was bad timing, but figured out how to study, my brain switched on.
Me too.
Yeah. Silly system. But interesting. So inflammation really does kill your brain.
Oh, absolutely. You get this wonderful thing called substance P, which is another one of the cytokine chemicals. And that one's really associated with a thing called central sensitization. But again, when it's acting in concert with interleukin-6, again, it promotes major depressive disorders and, it down-regulates tight junctions in the blood-brain barrier. Now, the blood-brain barrier is this really fascinating thing because the words themselves sound like the blood-brain barrier is this wall, like Trump's making a wall.
Well, he's trying to.
But it's not. Yeah. Well, see, this is the same problem. He's got tight junction problems in his blood-brain barrier as well, probably both personally, all offense included, as well as in actuality in that border wall. But the blood-brain barrier is actually just the connections between the cells in the epithelium lining the blood vessel itself. Now, if that's a capillary bed's one cell layer thick. So as soon as that tight junction becomes damaged because of substance P and interleukin-6 acting on it, they start to stretch. And chunks of LPS and other stuff can go from the bloodstream to in the brain cytosol. And so between those neuronal cells, and then they can start acting upon tissue that they shouldn't be. And then you get havoc. Isn't that neat?
That's very neat. But yeah, you name the brain problem and it's Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia. Let's just rattle them. Yeah. Crazy.
And that's why we're seeing that inflammation is such a big part of all neurological disorders.
So then the answer if someone had, regardless of whatever condition you've developed, be it eczema, psoriasis, acne, depression, anxiety, concussion, whatever, the end result is you need to do something about inflammation, and then you need to do something about your genes. But so if you were getting more, how would you approach that problem in a patient if they had more neurological condition signs versus more detox, skin, or gut reaction signs? Does it still come down to a common pathway because of the common gene breakdown that you need to be supplementing with A, B, and C? Or do you have a targeted approach to try and calm down the symptoms, knowing full well that all of these problems have a common starting point being the holes in the genes?
Yeah. It really depends on how metabolically stable that person is really the answer to it. So as we look at in a bunch of different things, there are neurological centers. We could work on the vagus nerve, which helps calm the sympathetic nervous system. And if you tone the vagus nerve and the sympathetic nervous system, was shown to take the person out of fight flight, which is shown to reduce cortisol, which is shown to reduce inflammation because cortisol upregulates that inflammatory response and causes leaking in those tight junctions. So lots and lots of neurorehabilitation work will actually help in these inflammatory scenarios.
Yeah, whether it's
that works really well.
Body.
Yeah, regardless. But it only works well if the person's metabolic state is actually well balanced and they're actually tolerant of being pushed neurologically. If they've got poor mitochondrial function, and as we've spoken about previously, the mitochondrial leakage is going on, then we're going to get kind of oxidative molecules breaking out of the mitochondria and getting into the tissue, and that causes oxidative damage to everything, and then that signals for more interleukin-6 through NF-kappa beta, and then that signals for tumor necrosis factor alpha, and that kicks in C-reactive protein, and as soon as that goes off, the whole system gets into trouble. So we definitely want to be doing that, but we have to determine where this particular patient is. So I would be doing things like a DNA test, looking at their SNPs and seeing what's there and what's not there. We'd be looking at changing diet. And one of my favorites for this is called the autoimmune protocol diet. And there are different versions. There's one called the Terry Wiles protocol. And lots of the functional medicine, neuronutritional practitioners out there have all their favorite names and titles for them. But basically, they all come down to taking away foods that we know are shown to have a likely inflammatory response, taking away things that we know you might be allergic to, and using things that are low in lectins and phytates and low in kind of proteins that are going to reactivate that immune response. We try and drive things that have a higher omega-3 basis, because omega-3 has been shown to be really useful for the brain and decreasing inflammation. We get rid of junk oils like cotton oil and canola oils and excessive omega-6 essential fatty acids, because omega-6, when it's out of balance to omega-3, can actually increase the prostaglandin production and increase an inflammatory response in the body. Obviously, sugar is delicious, but not necessarily very good for us. And high amounts of things like high fructose corn syrup or sucrose from table sugar are particularly bad for the brain, and is shown ultimately to create scenarios of mitochondrial leakage, because you get this unopposed excitation of mitochondrial function. And as soon as the electrons are unpaired, you start to break stuff. So that's kind of the way I'd be looking at it. And then you can look at supplementation as well. Certain supplements are going to be particularly helpful. Obviously, omega-3, as I just mentioned, there's things like alpha GPC, because choline's really useful for helping liver, but it's also helpful for the nervous system, and it's helpful for parasympathetic drive. There's bunches of different ways, and each person needs to be looked at individually, but globally, keep inflammation down, keep mitochondrial function working, and don't allow oxphosphorylation activation to occur in an unconstrained fashion. You've got to keep your redox potentials in check.
Okay.
Fancy words for don't burn yourself up too quick.
I like it.
Pretty much.
I like it.
Now, what's a really cool one that I forgot to mention? I got a great one. One of the really cool things that I've been studying recently is this wonderful thing called a myokine. Now, a myokine is actually interleukin-6, or one of them is, that's released by muscles after activation. So guess what's known to be one of the greatest anti-inflammatories that a human being can do?
One of the...
movement!
Who would have thought?
Who'd have thought? So exercise helps release. So lifting a weight or going for a walk, triathlon, almost any form of structured exercise that stimulates the muscle enough will actually release these myokines, which actually inhibit the tumor necrosis factor alpha, NF-kappa beta, CRP. So exercise and movement is actually highly anti-inflammatory, even though we might think otherwise.
Is that a sneaky way of piggybacking off a sort of evolutionary trick where we do exercise and we break up muscle tissue and we're releasing a localized anti-inflammatory thing so that the muscles can reknit?
I think that's exactly what it is. Now, I will point out that, perhaps if you looked at MMA or UFC sort of fighting or boxing, maybe, the training's one thing, but the exercise in the actual ring might be an entirely different matter for myokine release. So there's a limit to where that ends, I think.
Okay. Don't bash my head against the wall. Got it.
Yeah, pretty much.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite things that I've been studying. Yeah.
There was one question, so off the back, because we were talking before about the importance of keeping the omega-3 to 6 and that there are certain food groups that we should be staying away, and that's, pretty much hot chips, which is one of my favorite things in the world. So my question to you, and I keep in mind that I already know the answer to this question, but my question to you officially on a recorded fashion is, if I took a bucket load of fish oils before I had hot chips, would it balance itself out?
Well, there's no real truth to the answer either way, is the official statement, but probably not, unfortunately.
Scotty, you shocked me. I thought for sure you were just going to shoot me down immediately. That's the only reason I ask these questions, because I like ruffling your feathers a little
Yeah.
bit and seeing you get all
Yeah, no,
You see, that's the 20%
no,
arsehole
no,
in me
no.
kicking in. I just want to get a
Yeah.
rant out of you, but that was you actually
No, no, no.
considered my
So,
question for a minute there. Thank you, mate.
well, it means my brain must be working a bit quicker at the second in time.
Yeah. Your
Perhaps less.
mindfulness is kicking in, mate. Well done.
Yeah, absolutely. So the true answer is there's no real literature actually of any good quality that shows anyone doing the experiment. So it's realistically left to us to assume the true answer based upon other studies that show if you give heightened levels of X aggravant, will it damage you more than you can balance out? And the answer is basically yes. And let's face it, you can do a lot of damage very quickly eating the wrong things. Like, especially kind of beer battered hot chips, fried in cotton or canola oil will be massively upregulating of an inflammatory response. And when you look at the literature that shows that deep fried food makes all sorts of really nasty chemicals, such as acrylamide, which is particularly bad for you, there's no good place to come to. Unfortunately, because of the way the brain works, the brain likes sweet, salt, and carbs. And so something like a deep fried chip where you've got your fat, your carbohydrate for your sugars, you've got salt on it, is absolute heaven for the brain, because that is survival food 101. You stick that stuff around your mid-body, store it away for later. I'm not going to die anytime soon because I've got a buttload of energy. My salt and sodium level is balanced. Holy shit biscuits, that stuff is really, really good. But that's only because your brain is still a Neanderthal wandering the plains, and it doesn't understand that there are products like deep fried chips and crisps out there that have been designed by those wonderful food technology people to actually hit every one of your drivers. So, logic says we really all should leave those to kind of absolutely rare treat sort of things, but our brain is like, feed me more of those.
Want it now.
Yeah, that's it.
Unfortunately, with current technologies, there is no amount of anti-inflammatory supplement available that will undo shitty diets.
The answer is I don't think so.
Yep.
And it's based around there are probably chemicals you could take, but then the question mark is the side effect of that so great? Because if you block the inflammatory response, you also don't heal.
Yeah,
and
good point.
if you don't heal, you get into a... Correct. So we're really not trying to shut inflammation down. We're trying to temper it and stop it getting out of control. And so supplement-wise, the things that I'd be looking at apart from the omega-3 are things like sulforaphane, which you get both in a pill and from the brassica family as well, curcumin, green tea extracts such as the catechins, and echinacea. Now, what's really trippy is that cannabis is meant to have an anti-tumor necrosis factor alpha action. And this is thought to be indirectly due to cannabinoid CB1 and CB2. These receptors seem to suppress the tumor necrosis factor alpha action. And so this might be kind of where a lot of the research is going at this moment. But, Australia's not so keen on plants being helpful. So we're getting out there in the conspiracy world saying this stuff's good.
Mate, if you can't make lots of money at it from the pharmaceutical point of view, then anyway, we are getting conspiracy-ish. But there are some interesting research. Well, we can only ignore that research for so long before someone's going to have to really go, hey, we should be allowing this. It seems, especially as far as the MMA crowd goes, that CBD oil is almost a staple post-fight.
Oh, absolutely. Nate Diaz sitting there kind of smoking a joint, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He did get busted for that.
Was he smoking a joint,
I think
or was
the Nevada
he vaping?
panel...
So I thought he was vaping CBD oil that has the psychoactive
Oh, that's what it was.
Taken out of it. So, he wasn't actually getting high. It was just... Yeah, CBD oil.
Getting high.
Yeah, for anti-inflammatory. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure he smoked the real
Very
stuff
sensible.
afterwards, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, it's certainly a great experiment. And, from my point of view, I think we'd be a whole lot better off following places like Portugal and Holland's lead, where they decriminalised it and took all the money from turning drugs into criminal offences into treating it as if it's a health and neurological disorder. And their society got a whole lot better. Go figure.
yeah, who would have thought? Well, I think they've decriminalised a few types of magic mushroom on that point as well. But yeah,
Yeah.
interesting town. I've got
It is.
Beck's relatives live far too close to Amsterdam, so every time the one time that I did try and visit Amsterdam as a young 20-year-old expecting to go out and have fun, we were abducted and taken to a little country town outside of Amsterdam and given cake and tea. And so I'll never. I suspect the same thing would happen if I did try to go back to Amsterdam. So I'll have to live Amsterdam vicariously through others.
And the interesting thing there is that knowing your dietary stylings and situations, probably the going to a cannabis cafe, assuming they had gluten-free cookies, would be a hell of a lot better for you than going and visiting and eting the regular ones, because it might have downregulated the inflammation.
The vegan hash cookies. For sure, there's got to be a market. If there's not, then let's go set up a cafe in Amsterdam.
Yep. Absolutely. I mean, we'll get there. We'll get there at some point here. I mean, it just may be another 10 or 20 years before it actually occurs here in Australia.
Mate, this is let's sum up. This has been a good one. So essentially, look at your genes, because you can have genetic reasons for why you've got ongoing inflammatory chronic issues, and they can take the form of anxiety, depression, you name it. It's a thing. Either neurologically or body-wise. So consider genes as a reason why your body's not fixing itself like everyone else's. And then find someone like Scotty who knows what they're doing about interpreting genes tests and what supplements to take. But you were all beautiful, unique snowflakes. So unfortunately, there is no one size fits all, which is a bugger. Well, I suppose if there was, we would be a lot better than we currently are.
That seems very fair. One of the things that I probably want to mention before we disappear, especially because it's really, really, really popular at this moment, is these diets that are really, really low in iron. Now, all through these, yeah, that's the one. So I wasn't naming them. Someone else is doing that for me.
20% arsehole. I certainly will.
Yeah. So one of the genes that's essential for neurological health and well-being is a gene called tyrosine hydrolase. And tyrosine hydrolase is a tetramer. So it's got 4 chunks of protein held together in the center with an iron molecule. And it's essential for converting things like tyrosine into L-DOPA. Now, it uses biopterin, which is a byproduct from methylation, B12 and activated folate, along with this iron in a 2+ form and oxygen to actually make it occur. Now, if you look at every one of the neurotransmitters, such as noradrenaline, adrenaline, serotonin, they all require iron for best health and well-being. Now, as we're talking, we've been talking about mental health and well-being and looking at inflammation. There's a bunch of other really interesting things that can get you into mental health disorders just by eating a diet that you think might be really good for decreasing inflammation. Because again, things like the vegan diet and otherwise, and including the AOP diet, is shown to be notably anti-inflammatory, but they're very restrictive. And I think it's important to note that I don't promote restrictive diets. I promote removing someone's pure allergen and then trying to stabilize them so they can eat as wide a variety of natural foods, note that, natural meaning not in a packet, not highly processed, as possible. And diets need to have generally a moderate degree of iron in them for people's best health and mental well-being.
It's a good point.
Okay, enough ranting.
It's a good point.
Yep.
Iron's important. I like it. I like it.
Yeah.
All right, Scotty, you beautiful bastard. All right, you know what? I'm going to have to
Okay.
go and listen to one of the other podcasts to see exactly what my tagline for you is. I think it's you glorious. I don't know. Anyway, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Good one.
I'm okay either way. It's been fun. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for watching. To learn more from Dr. Scott, visit our site at optihuman.com.au.